Well, I guess so much for not taking a quarterback last year, huh? Whoopsie daisies. Especially if it was going to play out like this. My God. Oh, the Falcons. And look, on the one hand, it's hard to knock a team for taking Kyle Pitts where they did. It's really hard to knock a generational kind of physical talent at tight end, even if he is like a glorified wide receiver based off the modern game. It's really hard to pass on a guy like that because you knew when you watched Kyle Pitts that he was special. You knew he was going to be that dude. But then, how much does it really matter if you don't have the quarterback position answered for, especially in the long term? There's certainly plenty of conversation last year involving the Falcons. Whether they would have been better off taking a quarterback with that number 4 overall pick, sitting on him for a year or two and letting them learn and develop behind Matt Ryan, and then eventually moving on to the future. Which would seem to make some sense, especially when you were talking about they brought in a new general manager, a new head coach in Arthur Smith. Hey, Matt Ryan's from an old regime, and he's kind of old. He can still play, but at some point in time, you want to worry about the future. You would think that would be what you would do. Instead, they didn't do that, which made you think then, okay, they're really all in on Matt Ryan. They're trying to win with Matt Ryan, so go all in with Matt Ryan, which they also did not do that, which is just, on so many levels, like I said, this is really, really awkward. So much for Arthur Smith and Matt Ryan being a great pairing, huh? Yikes. So much for Matt Ryan being a Falcon for life, huh? Double yoinks. Shame, too, because you did all of this just because you were trying to get your hands on Deshaun Watson. Like, you play with the devil, don't be surprised if you get burned kind of deal. You didn't pull the deal down to get Deshaun Watson, and then you have to deal with the consequences, and now Matt Ryan wants out, and I frankly can't blame him. It's the same Matt Ryan that when he came into the organization in that 2008 draft, there was a lot of criticism. People talk about they should have taken frickin' Glenn Dorsey. You remember this is all post-Michael Vick drama stuff. Matty Ice was the franchise guy for 14 years. And this is how they treat him. They tried to throw him by the wayside for Deshaun Watson. Yeah, I could understand why he's a little bothered by that. So the Falcons ultimately traded their face of the franchise for almost a decade and a half to the Indianapolis Colts. And now you wonder what the hell is going on with the Falcons. They lost some guys in free agency like Oluokun, Russell Gage, Hayden Hurst, Dante Fowler. And what did they do in replacement? They signed some guys on the defense, Casey Hayward, him and A.J. Terrell. In the secondary, he's going to be a really good corner combination. Lorenzo Carter, Rashawn Evans. They signed Marcus Mariota to be the starter this year. Then you look at the draft, and they drafted guys like Drake London. So now it's really interesting to me. You drafted Kyle Pitts last year. You're drafting Drake London this year. That's great that you're getting those weapons in place, but you really think Mariota is going to be the guy? Maybe you hope at some point that Desmond Ridder can be, and maybe, who knows? But good Lord, it seems to be kind of wrong. Like, instead of helping the franchise quarterback you had in Matt Ryan, now you traded him away. It's just really, really awkward to me. So I don't see why there's much reason for hope or optimism with this Falcons team this year. I can't imagine I'm the only one, and I know at times Falcons fans have beef with me because I've said some things about their organization over the years, but I've also given them their due sometimes as well. But yeah, you look at this team right now, and on paper, and I realize that so much of this when you talk about on paper is whatever. But what exactly is there to be confident about or optimistic about or excited about? You have Kyle Pitts, yes, that's worth being excited about. I give you. And maybe the hope of Kyle Pitts and Drake London together, you're like, we got two premier pass catchers, two young pass catchers that can grow together. Eventually figure out the quarterback position, build up other pieces in the offense, and you'll be rocking and rolling again. And maybe you will. But it might be for a new coaching staff. Then you look at their corner tandem, easy for me to say, on defense with A.J. Terrell and Casey Hayward. That's a really good combination. And A.J. already doesn't get much in the way of props. It seems to be underrated, at least within NFL circles. He wasn't even on the NFL's top 100 list. That just seems crazy to me. So they have some marquee kind of star players on both sides of the ball, but they got holes to me all over the place. Still have questions about their offensive line, their running game. Like, is Cordero Patterson really going to be their leading rusher this year? Yikes. Probably not where you want to be with that. Their run defense, they couldn't stop anybody last year. What makes you think they're going to be able to stop it this year? Then you look at pass rush. They weren't able to generate a consistent pass rush last year. What makes you think this year would be any different? I'm sorry, but it'd be one thing if you could point there and say, hey, Desmond Ridder, they were going to roll with, and they're giving him the whole season to figure it out. Then at least to me with the Falcons, you could say, well, that's a productive season because you're trying to find out whether or not he could be the long-term answer for the next 15 years. So sometimes you might sacrifice the one. Well, it feels like they're sacrificing the 1 year and still not finding out about the young quarterback they have on their roster. And maybe the hope is that Marcus Mariota, who started a number of games at the NFL level, can work with Arthur Smith and he can have a bit of a bounce back. Yeah, ifs and buts were candies and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. Like, Marcus Mariota is not a starting quarterback in the league right now for a reason. And until proven otherwise, that reason is valid. It's because he's not good enough. And even if he was, he can't stay healthy enough. So I guess if you're a Falcons fan, you just ride out the string with Marcus Mariota until he's either ineffective or gets injured. One of those two seems inevitable. And then you put in Desmond Ridder and see what you have this year, right? What else you got to look forward to? In terms of the Falcons, you look at key stretches of the schedule for them this year. You've got a tough stretch. It looks like weeks 5 through 7. You got to go to Tampa Bay, hosting San Francisco, go to Cincinnati. Those are 3 playoff teams from last year, 3 teams that, all made at least the divisional round. The 49ers made the conference championship game round, and the Bengals almost won the Super Bowl. So that's a tough stretch right there. And you look at weeks 10 through 13. This might be a stretch of games where if you want to be more optimistic about the Falcons and their chances in 2022, this is a stretch of schedule where you envision they might do well. Got to go to Carolina, host Chicago, go back on the road to take on the Commanders. The freaking Commanders, what a dumb name. And the Steelers at home. So that's a stretch that if you want to be optimistic, you want to be positive about the season, that's a stretch that you probably point to. But again, I just got to be honest here. Where else did they really go and get so much better that it compensates for the loss of a Matt Ryan? Right? I mean, and this happens all the time, that we overrate teams or we underrate teams based off of the perceived moves, what they look like on paper, and that's very possible here. But the Falcons sure seem like a 4 or 5 win team destined to end up with a top 5 pick in the next year's NFL draft. Am I crazy? It sure doesn't feel that way. At least maybe you could say, hey, we got Kyle Pitts and we got Drake London to watch on offense, so we won't be totally boring. Yeah, but your team won't be very good.